The whisper had spread through the city's vampire courts like wildfire. Oberion Hargrove, the vampire king himself, had purchased exclusive access to Marcellini's, the most prestigious restaurant in the district, for an entire evening, and he'd done it for a human woman. Zara Reynolds had no idea about the rumors. She only knew that her week had been a special kind of terrible. Her promotion at the art gallery had fallen through. Her apartment building had started renovations that began at 6 every morning, and she'd spent the last 4 nights surviving on 3 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. Tonight was supposed to be her reward to herself, a quiet dinner alone at Marcellini's, a place she'd been saving up for months to afford. She'd made the reservation 6 weeks ago, back when she'd still thought the promotion was hers. Now it felt less like a celebration and more like a consolation prize. But she needed it. She needed one peaceful evening where she could sit with a glass of wine and remember what it felt like to exist without chaos pressing in from all sides. The restaurant was tucked into a historic building downtown, all dark wood and golden light spilling from tall windows. Zara pushed through the heavy front door and immediately felt the tension in her shoulders ease. The host stand was empty, which seemed odd for a Friday night, but she was too tired to question it. "Hello?" she called softly. A man appeared from the back, older, distinguished, wearing an impeccable suit. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or concern. "I have a reservation," Zara said, suddenly worried they'd given away her table. "Reynolds, 8 o'clock?" The man's expression shifted into something more carefully neutral. "Of course, Miss Reynolds. We've been expecting you. However, I must inform you that we're hosting a private event this evening. I'm afraid—" "A private event?" Zara's voice came out smaller than she intended. She could feel the exhaustion pressing behind her eyes, threatening tears she absolutely refused to shed in public. "But I made this reservation weeks ago. I confirmed it yesterday. I understand, and I apologize for the confusion. We attempted to contact you, but I never got a call." Zara pulled out her phone, checking for missed calls even though she knew there were none. "Look, I'm sorry, but I really need this tonight. Can't I just have a table in the corner? I promise I'll be quiet. I won't bother anyone." The man hesitated, and in that hesitation, another voice spoke from deeper in the restaurant. "Let her stay." The voice was deep, resonant, with an accent Zara couldn't place, something old-world and elegant. She turned toward the sound and felt her breath catch. The man who emerged from the shadows of the dining room looked like he'd stepped out of a painting. His skin was pale, not sickly pale, but luminous, like moonlight given form. His hair fell to his shoulders in waves of pure white, and his eyes were the color of dark wine. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. He was also looking directly at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "My lord," the host said, and there was definitely concern in his voice now. "The young lady was just leaving. I'll handle this." "I said let her stay." The man's gaze hadn't left Zara's face. "She made a reservation. She's tired. She wants one quiet meal." He paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "I understand the feeling." Zara found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "I don't want to intrude on your private event. If you're hosting something important, the event is mine to control." He took a step closer, and Zara noticed the way he moved, fluid, controlled, predatory. Something in her hindbrain whispered danger, but her conscious mind was too overwhelmed by his presence to listen. "And I control who stays and who goes. You'll stay." It wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. It fell somewhere in between, and Zara found herself nodding before she'd made a conscious decision. "All right," she said. "Thank you." The host looked like he wanted to protest, but the white-haired man made a small gesture, and the older man actually bowed before disappearing into the back. "I'm Oberion," the man said, extending his hand. Zara took it, expecting a handshake. Instead, he lifted her fingers to his lips and kissed her knuckles in a gesture so old-fashioned and formal that it should have seemed ridiculous. Somehow, on him, it was completely natural. "Zara," she managed. His hand was cool against hers, his touch gentle despite the obvious strength in his fingers. "A beautiful name." He released her hand slowly. "Come, I'll show you to your table." He led her through the dining room, and Zara finally understood why the host had been so surprised to see her. The restaurant was completely empty, except for one table by the window, set for a single person with elaborate care. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight, and the silverware gleamed against white linen. "This is for you," Oberion said, pulling out her chair. Zara sat slowly, feeling like she'd stumbled into some kind of dream. "I don't understand. You bought out the entire restaurant?" "I wanted peace." He moved to stand by the window, his profile sharp against the city lights beyond. "I wanted one evening without politics, without pretense, without others watching my every move and calculating how to use it against me. I wanted to eat a meal in silence and remember what it feels like to simply exist." He turned to look at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "I suspect you wanted the same thing." Zara felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time she didn't fight them quite as hard. "It's been a long week. Then we'll share the silence." Oberion moved toward a table on the opposite side of the room, set for one just like hers. "Eat, drink, pretend the world doesn't exist for a few hours. That's what I paid for, and that's what I'm offering you." A waiter appeared, another impeccably dressed man, who moved with the same unusual grace. He poured wine for Zara without asking, and she noticed Oberion received a different bottle, something darker that caught the light like rubies. They ate in silence, as promised. Zara had expected it to be awkward, but somehow it wasn't. There was something peaceful about sharing space with someone who understood the need for quiet, who didn't expect conversation or performance. She could hear the soft clink of silverware, the distant sounds of the kitchen, the gentle murmur of city traffic beyond the windows. The food was extraordinary, each course a small work of art that tasted even better than it looked. Zara found herself relaxing for the first time in days, the knot of tension in her chest slowly unwinding. She was halfway through her main course when she caught Oberion watching her, not staring exactly, but observing with that same intense focus he'd had when she'd first arrived. "I'm sorry," she said, suddenly self-conscious. "Am I eating too loudly? I can—" "No." His voice was soft. "I'm simply realizing that silence is better when it's shared. I've spent too many years alone." There was something in his tone, a loneliness so profound it made Zara's chest ache. She set down her fork. "How long?" she asked. Oberion was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Longer than you can imagine. Try me." He smiled then, and it transformed his face from merely beautiful to absolutely breathtaking. "I'm older than this city, older than this country. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched the world remake itself 100 times over." He paused. "And I've been a king for most of that time, which means I've been alone even when surrounded by thousands." Zara should have thought he was crazy. She should have made an excuse and left. But something in his voice rang true. And more than that, something in her chest recognized the truth of what he was saying, even if her mind couldn't quite process it. "A king," she repeated. "Of what?" Oberion's eyes caught the candlelight, and for just a moment they seemed to glow. "Would you believe me if I told you?" "I don't know," Zara admitted, "but I'd like to hear it anyway." He stood, moving with that unnatural grace, and crossed to her table. Up close, she could see that his skin really was luminous, and his eyes were darker than any human eyes should be. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, and Zara caught a scent like winter nights in old libraries. "I am vampire," Oberion said simply, "and I am their king." Zara's first instinct was to laugh, but the sound died in her throat, because as soon as he said it, everything clicked into place, his pale skin, his old-fashioned manners, the way he moved, the deference shown by the host and waiters, the way he made her pulse quicken with a mix of fear and attraction that felt almost chemical. "Vampires are real," she said slowly. "Yes." "And you're their king?" "Yes." "And you bought out an entire restaurant because you wanted a quiet meal?" "Yes." His lips twitched, though I'm finding I prefer the company. Zara reached for her wineglass and took a long drink. Her hands were surprisingly steady. "Okay, all right, vampires, that's fine. That's a thing now. She met his eyes. Are you going to kill me? No. The answer was immediate and firm. I would never harm you, Zara. I swear it on my very long life. Because I know your secret? Because you made me feel less alone. Oberion leaned forward, his expression intense. Do you know how rare that is? In all my centuries, I've met perhaps a handful of souls who could sit in silence beside me and make it feel like companionship rather than isolation. You did that without even trying. Zara's heart was racing, but not entirely from fear. I don't understand. Why me? I don't know. Oberion's voice was almost wondering. Perhaps because you needed the same thing I did. Perhaps because you looked at me and saw a man rather than a monster or a king. Perhaps because fate has a sense of irony. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. May I? Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. Oberion took her hand gently, his cool fingers wrapping around hers. I would like to know you, he said, if you'll allow it. I would like to learn what makes you laugh and what keeps you awake at night. I would like to hear your voice and share more silent meals and show you things you've never imagined. His thumb traced a circle on her palm. I would like to give you the peace you came here seeking, and I would like you to give me the companionship I've been starving for. Is that something you might want? Zara should have said no. She should have run. But she'd spent years being sensible, being careful, making the safe choices, and where had it gotten her? Passed over for promotions, exhausted, and eating dinner alone. Maybe it was time to choose something different. Yes, she whispered. I'd like that. Oberion's smile was radiant. Then finish your meal, Zara Reynolds, and after, I'll show you my world. They did finish eating, though Zara barely tasted the last course. Her mind was spinning with questions, but she held them back, honoring the silence that had brought them together. Oberion seemed content to simply sit across from her, occasionally refilling her wine, his eyes never leaving her face for long. When the final plates were cleared, Oberion stood and offered his hand. Come, Zara took it, letting him help her up. His touch was becoming familiar already, the cool press of his palm against hers oddly comforting. He led her through the restaurant to a back door she hadn't noticed before. Beyond it, a car was waiting, a sleek black vehicle that looked like it cost more than her entire yearly salary. A driver stood beside it, another pale-skinned man with the same inhuman grace. This is Victor, Oberion said. He's been with me for 3 centuries and is utterly trustworthy. Victor bowed to Zara, his expression carefully neutral. Miss Reynolds. Oberion handed her into the back seat, then slid in beside her. The interior was all leather and dark wood, luxurious and faintly anachronistic. As soon as the door closed, the outside world seemed to fade away. Where are we going? Zara asked. To my home. Oberion settled back against the seat, angling his body toward her. To the heart of the vampire court, to a world hidden beneath this city that most humans never see. Is it safe? For me, I mean. Oberion's expression darkened. With me beside you, you're safer than anywhere else in this world. I'm the vampire king, Zara. No one would dare harm what's mine. I'm not yours, Zara said automatically, though the words felt less certain than they should have. No, Oberion agreed softly. But I would like you to be. In time. If you choose it. The car wound through the city streets, eventually turning down a ramp that led underground. They descended into a parking structure, but instead of stopping, they kept going, deeper and deeper, until Zara was sure they must be stories below the surface. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground space. Zara pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass. Before them stretched what looked like an entire city, buildings carved from stone, streets lit by crystals that glowed with soft light, bridges arching over underground rivers. It was beautiful and impossible and utterly alien. This is the Undercity, Oberion said, watching her reaction with obvious pleasure. The vampire heart of the modern world. We've built our society in the spaces between yours, in the depths where sunlight can't reach. Every major city has one, but this is the largest in the Western Hemisphere. This is where I rule from. The car drove through streets filled with figures, all of them pale-skinned and graceful, all of them moving with that same predatory elegance. They wore everything from modern clothing to elaborate period dress, and all of them stopped to stare as the car passed. Many bowed. "They're all vampires?" Zara asked. "Yes. Several thousand live here permanently. More come and go." Oberion's hand found hers again. "Are you frightened?" "Terrified," Zara admitted, "but also fascinated. This is incredible, Oberion. It's like something out of a story. It's very real, and very dangerous for humans." His hand tightened on hers. "Which is why you must stay close to me. The law of our kind is absolute. No vampire may harm a human under the king's protection. As long as you're with me, you're untouchable." The car pulled up before a massive structure that looked like a Gothic cathedral, and a fortress had somehow merged. Towers stretched toward the cavern ceiling, and stained glass windows glowed from within. It was magnificent, and more than a little terrifying. Victor opened the door, and Oberion stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Zara. She emerged into cool underground air that smelled of stone and strange flowers. Immediately, she felt eyes on her from every direction. "Stay close," Oberion murmured, pulling her against his side. His arm wrapped around her waist with possessive confidence. "And don't show fear. They can sense it." They climbed the steps to the entrance where massive doors swung open to reveal a throne room straight out of medieval history. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by carved pillars. The floor was polished stone that reflected the light from hundreds of candles. And at the far end, on a raised dais, sat two thrones, one occupied by a pale woman in an elaborate gown, the other empty. "Oberion." The woman's voice was cold as winter frost. She rose, her movements deliberate and graceful. "You've returned, and you've brought a guest." "Lady Seraphine," Oberion said, his tone formal. "May I present Zara Reynolds? She is under my protection." Seraphine descended the dais steps, her eyes fixed on Zara with an intensity that made Zara want to shrink back. She was beautiful in the same unearthly way Oberion was, but where his presence felt magnetic, hers felt dangerous. "A human." Seraphine circled them slowly. "In the throne room. How unprecedented. Tell me, girl, do you know what you've walked into?" "Not really," Zara said, surprised by how steady her voice came out. "But I'm learning." Seraphine laughed, the sound like breaking ice. "She has courage, at least. That's something." She turned to Oberion. "The council has been waiting for you. There are matters that require your attention." "The council can wait until tomorrow." Oberion's voice carried absolute authority. "Tonight, I'm otherwise occupied." "Occupied?" Seraphine's eyebrows rose. "With a human?" "Oberion, you can't be serious. The implications of this are mine to manage." Oberion cut her off smoothly. "Unless you're questioning my authority, Seraphine." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Seraphine held his gaze for a long moment, then dropped her eyes first. "Of course not, my king." The title dripped with resentment. "I merely caution prudence." "Your caution is noted." Oberion's hand settled on the small of Zara's back. "Come, I'll show you my chambers." He guided her past Seraphine, past several other vampires who had gathered to watch, down a long corridor lined with portraits of pale faces. Zara caught glimpses of elaborate clothing from every era, stern expressions, eyes that seemed to follow her movement. "Past kings?" she asked. "Past enemies," Oberion corrected. "We don't do succession here. I've been king for 800 years, and I'll remain king until someone strong enough to kill me comes along." He said it casually, as if discussing the weather. "These are the ones who tried and failed." Zara looked at the portraits with new understanding. "How many?" 43. Oberion's voice was flat. "There are others I didn't bother to memorialize." They reached a set of ornate doors that swung open at Oberion's approach. Beyond was a suite of rooms that managed to be both luxurious and comfortable. The furniture was old, genuinely antique, Zara suspected, but well-maintained. Books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves, and artwork covered the walls. A fire burned in an enormous hearth, which seemed impossible this far underground, but Zara was past questioning such things. "This is where I live," Oberion said, watching her take it in. "My private sanctuary. Very few are allowed here." Zara moved to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. Some were in English, others in languages she didn't recognize. "You read all these?" "Several times over. One of the challenges of immortality is finding ways to fill the hours." Oberion came to stand beside her. I've read every great work of literature, learned every language, mastered every art and science I found interesting. And still, the years stretch on. There was such loneliness in his voice that Zara turned to face him fully. That sounds exhausting. It is. Oberion's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch feather light. Until tonight, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised, to be interested, to want to know everything about another person. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You've reminded me, Zara. In the space of a few hours, you've made me feel more alive than I have in decades. Zara's breath caught. She knew she should be more careful, more cautious. But looking into Oberion's ancient eyes, she saw something that called to her own lonely soul, the recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it meant to feel isolated in a crowd. I don't understand this, she whispered. How can I feel this way about someone I just met? Perhaps some souls recognize each other. Oberion leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Perhaps destiny is real, and it has a plan. Or perhaps we're simply two lost creatures who found each other at exactly the right moment. His eyes searched hers. Does it matter why? No, Zara breathed. I suppose it doesn't. Oberion closed the last bit of distance between them, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was somehow both gentle and devastating. Zara melted into him, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. He tasted like wine in winter, and his mouth moved against hers with centuries of practice, knowing exactly how to make her gasp, how to draw soft sounds from her throat. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Oberion rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, he murmured. Not for anything more than this I would never presume. But stay. Let me learn the sound of another heartbeat in these rooms. Let me wake and find I wasn't dreaming. Yes, Zara said simply. Oberion showed her to a bedroom not his own, she noticed, but a guest room decorated in soft blues and silvers. He provided her with clothes to sleep in, oversized but comfortable, and pointed out the adjoining bathroom with its impossible luxury. I'll be in the next room if you need anything, he said from the doorway. Anything at all. Oberion? Zara called as he turned to leave. Yes? Thank you. For tonight. For all of this. His smile was soft and genuine. Thank you, Zara, for reminding me why immortality might be worth living. Zara slept better than she had in weeks, which was absurd considering she was in an underground vampire fortress. She woke to find sunlight, actual sunlight, streaming through a window that shouldn't exist. It took her a moment to realize it was artificial, a clever system of lights designed to mimic natural day. A knock at the door was followed by a young woman entering with a tray of breakfast and a garment bag. The woman was human, Zara realized with some relief. Her skin had color, and she moved with normal human grace. Good morning, Miss Reynolds, the woman said with a smile. His Majesty thought you might be hungry, and he sent these. She hung the garment bag on a hook. For today, if you'd like them. Inside the bag were clothes in Zara's exact size, well-made, comfortable, stylish. Somehow, Oberion had known her measurements perfectly. She ate breakfast, showered, and dressed, marveling at how normal it all felt despite the surrealness of the situation. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Oberion waiting in the main room, reading by the fire. He looked up as she entered, and his expression was so openly delighted that it made her heart skip. You're still here, he said, as if he'd half expected her to vanish. Where else would I be? Zara moved to sit beside him. Though I probably should call my work and my apartment. People will worry. Of course. Oberion produced her phone, she realized. I had it brought from your purse, and I've taken the liberty of having your apartment checked on. There was an issue with your pipes that could have caused flooding. It's been addressed. Zara took the phone, not sure whether to be grateful or disturbed by his efficiency. You work fast. I've had a long time to perfect the art of resource management. Oberion's expression turned serious. Zara, I need to explain something. What happened last night bringing you here, it has implications. The vampire world is built on tradition and power, and the king's choice of companion is never just personal. Companion? Zara repeated. Consort, if you prefer. Partner. The one who stands beside the throne. Oberion took her hand. By bringing you here, by showing you my world, I've made a statement whether I intended to or not. The court will assume you're being considered for that position. That's a position? One that hasn't been filled in 300 years. Oberion's thumb traced circles on her palm. The last woman I brought here betrayed me to my enemies. I've been alone since. Zara felt the weight of that revelation. I would never betray you. I know. Oberion's voice was fierce. I know it in my bones, Zara, but others will test you. They'll question whether a human can stand beside a vampire king. They'll look for weaknesses to exploit. His eyes met hers. I want you to understand what you're walking into. I want you to have the choice. What are my options? I can take you home. We can part as friends who shared one perfect evening. You'll be protected from vampire influence, and I'll ensure your life continues undisturbed. Oberion paused. Or you can stay. You can learn our world, meet our people, and decide if this is something you want. If I'm someone you want. And if I choose to stay, and later decide it's not for me, then I let you go. Oberion's voice was steady, but Zara could see the pain in his eyes at the thought. I would never trap you here, Zara. Your freedom is yours, always. Zara thought about her apartment with its early morning construction, her job at the gallery where she'd been passed over for promotion, her life that had felt so small and exhausting just yesterday. And she thought about Oberion, his loneliness, his strength, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare. I want to stay, she said, at least for a while. I want to see what this could be. Oberion's relief was palpable. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her palm with a tenderness that made her shiver. Then I'll show you everything, starting with the parts of court you didn't see last night. He took her through the fortress, explaining as they went. The throne room where he held public audience, the council chambers where the eldest vampires advised him on matters of law and politics, the training yards where vampire warriors practiced with weapons both ancient and modern, the libraries that held thousands of years of history, the gardens, impossible underground gardens where strange bioluminescent plants grew in carefully tended beauty. Everywhere they went, vampires stopped and stared. Some bowed respectfully. Others watched with obvious calculation or disdain. Oberion kept Zara close, his hand always on her back or holding hers, a clear signal of protection and claim. They encountered Seraphine again in the gardens. The vampire woman was surrounded by others, all beautiful and dangerous looking. They fell silent as Oberion and Zara approached. "My king," Seraphine said with a shallow bow. "Still playing tour guide?" "Still questioning my choices, Seraphine." Oberion's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Merely concerned for the stability of the court." Seraphine's eyes flicked to Zara. "A human consort is unprecedented in our modern age. There will be those who see it as weakness. Then they're welcome to challenge me and discover how weak I am." Oberion's voice was pleasant, but Zara felt the shift in the air, the sudden sense of power that radiated from him like heat. Was there something else? Seraphine held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. "No, my king." As they walked away, Zara whispered, "She hates me. She hates that you make me happy." Oberion squeezed her hand. "Seraphine has been vying for the consort position for 2 centuries. She sees you as an obstacle." "Is she dangerous?" "To others, yes. To you, no." Oberion's voice was absolute. "I won't allow it." But Zara saw the way Seraphine watched them leave, and she wasn't entirely convinced. The next few days fell into a strange but pleasant rhythm. Zara spent her mornings learning about vampire society from books and from Oberion himself. He was a patient teacher, explaining the complex web of bloodlines, territories, and ancient laws that governed his people. She learned that vampires could walk in daylight for brief periods with protection, but it was painful and weakening. She learned that they didn't need to kill to feed. Most modern vampires used willing donors or blood banks. She learned that the transformation from human to vampire was rare and difficult, requiring not just the vampire's blood, but an act of will and surrender that many humans couldn't manage. Her afternoons were spent exploring the Undercity, always with Oberion at her side. He showed her shops that sold impossibly old artifacts, cafes where vampires gathered to socialize, theaters where centuries-old plays were performed by actors who remembered the original productions. It was a rich, complex culture, and Zara found herself fascinated by it. Her evenings belonged to Oberion alone. They would have dinner together, Zara eating human food, Oberion drinking what she'd learned was donated blood from discreet sources. They would talk for hours, sharing stories of their vastly different lives. Oberion told her about watching empires fall, about meeting historical figures she'd only read about in books, about the weight of centuries and the strange time distortion that came with immortality. Zara told him about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about her love of art and beauty, about her dreams of traveling and seeing the world beyond her small life. I can give you that," Oberion said one night as they sat by the fire in his chambers. "The world. All of it. I can show you every museum, every hidden wonder, every secret place I've discovered in 800 years. "That's a dangerous offer," Zara said, but she was smiling. "I might take you up on it." "I hope you will." Oberion pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. She'd grown used to his coolness, the way his body didn't generate heat the way hers did. "I want to give you everything, Zara, everything you've ever wanted." "I mostly just want this," Zara admitted. "These quiet hours with you, learning your stories, feeling like I matter to someone." "You matter." Oberion turned her face to his expression intense. "You matter more than you can possibly know." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Zara melted into him. These kisses were becoming familiar, but they never lost their power. Every time Oberion touched her, she felt like she was burning and freezing at once, like every nerve in her body had woken up for the first time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Oberion rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "I know it's too soon. I know it's impossible, but I can't deny it anymore." Zara's heart felt too big for her chest. "It's not impossible. I'm falling too." "Then stay." Oberion's hands framed her face. "Not just for a while. Stay with me, Zara. Be mine and let me be yours." "I'm human," Zara said, though her hands had come up to grip his wrists, holding him to her. "I'll age, I'll die, you'll live forever. Then I'll love you for every year you give me and treasure the memory after." Oberion's voice was fierce. "A mortal lifetime with you is worth more than an eternity alone." "There must be another way," Zara said. "You mentioned transformation. Could I—" "No." Oberion's response was sharp enough to make her flinch. He softened immediately, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I'm sorry, but no. The transformation is dangerous, Zara. Most humans don't survive it, and those who do are changed in ways beyond the physical. I won't risk you like that. I won't risk losing the essential spark that makes you who you are. But we'll find another way." Oberion kissed her gently. "There are magics, old bargains, ways to extend human life without the transformation. I'll research them all. I'll find a solution." His eyes met hers. "But even if I can't, even if all we have is 50 or 60 years, I'll take them. I'll take every day you're willing to give me." Zara felt tears on her cheeks. "You really mean that? With everything I am?" Oberion kissed away her tears. "Say yes, Zara. Say you'll stay." "Yes," Zara breathed. "Yes, I'll stay." The next morning, Oberion called a formal court session. Zara dressed in one of the gowns he'd provided, a deep blue creation that made her feel like royalty. When she emerged, Oberion was waiting in full court regalia. He wore black and silver with a circlet of white gold on his brow. He looked every inch the king, powerful and remote. But when he saw her, his expression softened into pure warmth. "Beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. They walked to the throne room together. The space was packed with vampires, all dressed in their finest. Zara felt hundreds of eyes on her as they made their way down the center aisle. Oberion led her up to the dais, and for a moment she thought he was going to have her stand beside the empty throne. Instead, he turned to face the assembled court, keeping her hand in his. "My people," he said, his voice carrying through the vast space. "I stand before you today to announce my choice of consort. Zara Reynolds, a human woman of courage and grace, has agreed to stand beside me. She is under my protection, now and always. Any who would harm her, threaten her, or work against her will answer to me directly." The room erupted in murmurs. Zara saw Seraphine in the crowd, her face twisted with rage, but she also saw others who looked pleased or at least neutral. Is this wise, my king? An old vampire stepped forward from the council section. A human consort is my choice. Oberion's voice cut through the noise like a blade. And my choice is law. Does anyone wish to challenge that? Silence fell. No one moved. Good. Oberion's hand tightened on Zara's. Then let it be known Zara Reynolds is under royal protection. The law binds you all. He turned and led Zara to the second throne, the one that had been empty for 300 years. At his gesture, she sat, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Oberion took his own throne, and for the first time in centuries, both seats of vampire power were filled. The court session proceeded with various matters of business, territorial disputes, requests for judgment, updates on vampire activities in the upper world. Zara watched and learned, beginning to understand the complexities of ruling an immortal society. Oberion was fair but firm, his judgments swift and absolute. He commanded the room effortlessly, and Zara found herself in awe of him all over again. But she also noticed the undercurrents, the way certain vampires exchanged glances, the way Seraphine watched from the shadows, her expression calculating. Zara had spent enough time in office politics to recognize scheming when she saw it. After the session ended, Oberion took her back to his chambers. The moment the doors closed, his formal demeanor dropped away, and he pulled her into his arms. "You are perfect," he said into her hair. "So strong and calm, even with all those eyes on you." "I was terrified," Zara admitted. "I know. But you didn't show it." Oberion pulled back to look at her. "You're going to be an extraordinary queen, Zara." "Queen?" Zara's eyes widened. "I thought I was a consort." "The consort of the king is the queen," Oberion smiled. "Did I forget to mention that part?" "You definitely forgot to mention that part." Zara pushed at his chest, but she was laughing. "A queen? Me? That's insane." "Is it any more insane than falling in love with a vampire?" Oberion caught her hands, bringing them to his lips, then agreeing to share my life, my world. "Point taken." Zara sobered. "But Oberion, I saw the way some of them looked at me, at us. Not everyone is happy about this." "No." Oberion agreed. "They're not. Change is difficult for immortals. We grow set in our ways over centuries. A human queen challenges everything they think they know about power and hierarchy." His expression hardened. "But they'll adapt, or they'll leave. Those are their only options. And if they choose violence instead, then they'll learn why I've held this throne for 800 years. Oberion's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "I'm not just a king because of tradition, Zara. I'm king because I'm the strongest, the fastest, the most ruthless when I need to be. No one can challenge me and survive." Zara believed him. She'd seen glimpses of the predator underneath the gentleman, the ancient power that Oberion usually kept carefully controlled. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt safe, knowing that power was dedicated to protecting her. The attack came 3 nights later. Zara was alone in Oberion's chambers. He'd been called to deal with a territorial dispute and had promised to return within the hour. She was reading by the fire, comfortable and relaxed, when the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. She looked up to find 5 figures materializing from the shadows, all vampires, all armed. Zara was on her feet instantly, her heart racing. Oberion isn't here," one of them said. She recognized him from court, a young vampire with ambitious eyes. "And by the time he returns, you'll be dead, and the throne will be challenged. A weak king who can't even protect his human pet doesn't deserve to rule." "You're making a mistake," Zara said, backing toward the bedroom. If she could reach the panic button Oberion had shown her. The only mistake was Oberion's, bringing you here. Another vampire circled to cut off her escape. "Nothing personal, human. You're just a symbol that needs to be removed." They lunged. Zara dove to the side, grabbing a fire poker from the hearth. It wasn't much, but it was something. She swung hard, catching one vampire across the face. He hissed, fangs extending, and she saw her death in his eyes. Then, the doors exploded inward. Oberion moved faster than Zara's eyes could track. One moment he was in the doorway, the next he had a vampire by the throat, lifting him off the floor. The vampire's scream was cut off with a sickening crunch. "You dare!" Oberion's voice was utterly calm, and that was somehow more terrifying than rage would have been. "You dare attack what's mine!" The other vampires tried to flee. They didn't make it 2 steps. What followed was brutal and swift. Oberion tore through them with a savage efficiency that left no doubt about why he was king. When it was over, 5 vampires lay motionless on his floor, and Oberion stood among them, breathing hard, his hands stained with blood that was already fading to ash. Then his eyes found Zara, and the monster disappeared, replaced by desperate concern. "Are you hurt?" He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands running over her arms, her face, checking for injuries. "Did they touch you? Did they—" "I'm fine." Zara was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her system. "You got here in time." "I shouldn't have left you alone." Oberion pulled her against his chest, his arms iron tight around her. "I should have known, should have anticipated." "You can't watch me every moment," Zara said, even as she clung to him. "Yes, I can." Oberion's voice was fierce. "And I will. I'll station guards. I'll ward these rooms with blood magic. I'll make it known that anyone who even looks at you wrong will answer to me." "Oberion, I can't lose you." His voice cracked. "Zara, I can't. Not when I've finally found someone who makes eternity feel like a gift instead of a curse." Zara pulled back enough to look at him. His face was strained, his eyes wild with an emotion that went beyond fear. This was the cost of immortality, she realized, loving something mortal, something fragile, knowing it could be taken away at any moment. "You won't lose me," she said firmly. "But you need to let me be part of protecting myself. Teach me. Show me how to survive in your world. Let me be strong, not just protected." Oberion studied her face, then slowly nodded. "All right. Tomorrow, the training starts. I'll teach you everything I know about vampire weaknesses, about defending yourself, about surviving in a world of predators." His hand cupped her cheek. "But tonight, let me just hold you. Let me convince myself you're safe." They moved to the bedroom, and Oberion held her as promised, his arms wrapped around her, his face buried in her hair. Zara felt his body gradually relax, felt the tension drain out of him as the night wore on. "Tell me about the best day of your life," she said softly. Oberion was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The day I met you, the day I saw you walk into that restaurant looking exhausted and beautiful and so achingly human, the day I learned that after 800 years I could still be surprised, still fall in love, still feel hope." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Every day with you has been the best day, Zara." Zara turned in his arms, finding his mouth with hers. The kiss was slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she whispered, "Then let's have 1,000 more of them." The training did begin the next day. Oberion was a ruthless but patient teacher, showing Zara the vulnerabilities of vampire physiology. Silver didn't hurt them like legend claimed, but iron did, especially blessed iron from old churches. Sunlight was deadly, but so was certain UV technology. Fire was devastating. Vampires burned faster than humans. He taught her to move silently, to be aware of her surroundings, to recognize the signs of vampire presence. He armed her with weapons designed to kill his own kind: iron stakes, UV grenades, blessed blades. And he made her practice until her muscles ached and her hands were covered in blisters. "Again," he said as she fumbled a defensive move. "A vampire won't give you time to think. You need this to be instinct." "I'm trying," Zara panted. "I know." Oberion's expression softened. He moved behind her, adjusting her stance, his hands guiding hers. "Like this. Feel the balance. When they come at you, you shift your weight and redirect their momentum." They practiced until Zara could execute the move perfectly 10 times in a row. Only then did Oberion call a halt. "Better," he said, handing her water. "Much better." "How long did it take you to learn all this?" Zara asked. "Decades." Oberion smiled slightly. "But I'm hoping to have you combat ready in months. You have motivation I lacked. I was trained to hunt. You're being trained to survive." The weeks passed. Zara grew stronger, faster, more confident. She also grew more integrated into vampire society. Oberion took her to council meetings, letting her observe the complex politics of immortal governance. He introduced her to allied bloodlines, to vampire scholars and artists and warriors. Slowly, she began to earn respect, not as Oberion's pet, but as someone with her own intelligence and strengths. Even Seraphine seemed to moderate her hostility, though Zara suspected that had more to do with fear of Oberion than any real change of heart. 2 months after Zara had first walked into that restaurant, Oberion took her back to the surface. They drove to a private estate outside the city, arriving just before sunset. The house was smaller than the underground fortress, but no less luxurious, all stone and glass and careful elegance. "What is this place?" Zara asked as they walked up to the entrance. "Somewhere I haven't been in a very long time." Oberion led her inside to a conservatory filled with windows. "I built this house 200 years ago when I thought I might try to integrate more with the human world. I wanted somewhere with natural light, with views of the sky." He gestured to the windows which faced west. "Somewhere I could watch sunsets." "Can you?" Zara started to ask. "No." Oberion's voice was soft. "I can't step into direct sunlight, not without severe pain and damage. But I can stand here, behind glass, and pretend I remember what it felt like." Zara's heart ached for him. "What was it like, before?" "Warm." Oberion's eyes were distant. "I grew up in a small village, farming. I remember working in the fields, feeling the sun on my back. I remember summer days that seemed endless, and the way everything smelled like growing things." He paused. "I was 19 when I was turned, young and stupid and desperate to escape a war that would have killed me anyway. A vampire offered me a choice: die in battle or live forever. I chose immortality without understanding what I was giving up. Do you regret it?" "I did. For centuries I regretted it." Oberion turned to look at her, and his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "But not anymore. If I'd stayed human, I would have died 800 years ago. I never would have met you. And meeting you, Zara, loving you, that makes everything worth it." The sun touched the horizon, and golden light flooded the conservatory. It painted Oberion in shades of amber and rose, made his white hair glow like a halo. He stood perfectly still, his face turned toward the light he could never directly feel again, and Zara had never seen anything more beautiful or more heartbreaking. She went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Oberion's hands came up to cover hers, and they stood together in the sunset's glow. "I love you," Zara said. "Whatever the future holds, whatever challenges come, I love you." Oberion turned in her arms, his eyes bright with emotion. "And I love you, my Zara, my light, my reason for existing." He kissed her as the sun set behind them, and Zara felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. They were right. Everything else, the politics, the danger, the impossibility of a human and vampire, love, all of it, was manageable as long as they were together. When they returned to the Undercity that night, Oberion called another court session. This time, when he led Zara to the throne, he had her sit before turning to address the assembled vampires. "My people," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Zara Reynolds has proven herself worthy of standing beside me. She's earned the respect of our warriors, the acknowledgement of our scholars, and my complete devotion. Therefore, I formally name her Queen Consort of the Vampire Realm. She speaks with my authority, rules with my power, and any who serve me serve her as well." He drew a dagger, ceremonial, beautiful, deadly, and made a swift cut across his palm. Blood welled, dark and viscous. "By blood and oath, I bind myself to her. By ancient law, I claim her as mine and offer myself as hers." He held out his hand to Zara. Zara understood what he was offering. A blood bond. The deepest connection vampires could make, reserved for mates and the most trusted allies. It wouldn't make her vampire, but it would link them, let her sense his emotions, give her some of his strength. She stood and took the dagger. Without hesitation, she cut her own palm and pressed it to Oberion's. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. She felt Oberion's presence flood into her mind, his love, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute devotion. And underneath it, the vast weight of his age, his power, the monster and the man coexisting in perfect balance. "Zara Reynolds," Oberion said formally, though his eyes were soft on her face. "Do you accept this bond? Do you accept me and all that I am?" "I do," Zara said clearly. "I accept you, Oberion Hargrove, every part of you." Their joined hands glowed with soft light, and Zara felt something click into place deep in her soul. When it faded, Oberion smiled a real smile, full of joy and relief and love. "Then it's done," he said. "We're bound. You're mine and I'm yours until death takes one of us." The court erupted in applause. Even Seraphine was clapping, though her expression was unreadable. That night, Oberion took Zara to his bedroom for the first time. They made love slowly, carefully. Oberion's centuries of experience matched against his desperate need to be gentle with her. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, and Zara traced idle patterns on his chest. "I can feel you," she said wonderingly. "In my head, your emotions. And I can feel yours." Oberion caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "It's intoxicating, knowing exactly how you feel about me, having no doubts or uncertainties." "Does it bother you?" Zara asked. "That I'm feeling so many things right now? Happy and scared and overwhelmed and so completely in love I can barely think straight?" "It's perfect." Oberion rolled to pin her beneath him, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "You're perfect. And you're mine. Finally, after so many empty years, I have someone worth living for." The months that followed were the happiest of Zara's life. She settled into her role as queen, learning to navigate vampire politics with increasing skill. She made alliances, mediated disputes, and slowly earned the loyalty of vampires who had initially resented her presence. Oberion was beside her every step, supportive but never overshadowing, letting her find her own strength. They traveled too, fulfilling Oberion's promise to show her the world. They visited ancient vampire strongholds in Europe, where Oberion had old friends and older enemies. They explored ruins in South America, where vampire civilizations had risen and fallen before European contact. They walked through Japanese gardens at midnight, attended vampire courts in cities most humans had never heard of, and danced in ballrooms that hadn't seen mortal feet in centuries. And everywhere they went, Zara saw the same thing in Oberion's eyes: wonder. As if he was seeing everything fresh through her perspective, as if her joy and discovery rekindled his own capacity for amazement. But the question of mortality hung over them like a shadow. Zara was aging normally, slowly, perhaps, but still aging. And no matter how much research Oberion did, he couldn't find a way to extend her life without the transformation. "There has to be something," Oberion said one night, surrounded by ancient texts in his study. "Some magic, some bargain, some way to keep you with me." "Oberion," Zara moved to sit beside him. "We need to talk about this, really talk about it." "No," his voice was flat. "I won't discuss losing you. But we have to." Zara took his hand. "I'm human. I'm going to age and die. That's inevitable, and you need to accept it." "I won't." Oberion's eyes met hers, and she saw the desperation there. "I can't watch you fade, Zara. I can't watch you grow old and weak while I stay the same. It will destroy me." "Then turn me," Zara said it calmly, though her heart was racing. "Make me vampire." "No." Oberion stood abruptly. "We've discussed this. The transformation is too dangerous. You could die, and even if you survive, you'd be changed different. I won't risk the woman I love to create a vampire wearing her face." "But it would be me," Zara insisted. "A different me, maybe, but still me. My memories, my love for you, all of that would remain." "You don't know that." Oberion's voice was anguished. "I've seen transformations fail. I've seen humans survive only to become hollow shells, monsters who can't remember why they chose immortality. I won't do that to you." "Then what's the alternative?" Zara demanded. "I have what, 60 years if I'm lucky? 60 years and then you're alone again for eternity? How is that better?" Oberion was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I don't know, but there has to be another way." The argument continued over the following weeks. Zara pushed for transformation. Oberion refused. The bond between them carried their emotions back and forth, her frustration and determination, his terror and stubborn protectiveness. Finally, Seraphine intervened. She requested a private audience with Zara, which was unusual enough that Zara agreed out of sheer curiosity. They met in one of the palace gardens, surrounded by glowing flowers and the sound of underground water. "You want to be turned," Seraphine said without preamble. "Yes," Zara confirmed, "but Oberion won't do it." "Because he's afraid." Seraphine's expression was complicated. "I've known Oberion for 4 centuries. I've watched him rule, watched him love and lose. The last woman he turned destroyed him when she betrayed him afterward. He swore he'd never transform another human again." "I'm not her," Zara said. "I know." Seraphine studied her. "I hated you at first, resented you for taking the place I'd wanted for so long. But I've watched you these past months. You're strong, clever. You genuinely love him, not his power or his immortality." She paused. "You'd make a good vampire." "Will you turn me?" Zara asked, hope flaring. "No." Seraphine shook her head. "It has to be him. The bond between you is too strong. If another vampire turns you, it could break the connection, leave you both damaged." Her eyes were serious. "But I can tell you how to convince him." "How?" "By making him more afraid of losing you to death than he is of the transformation." Seraphine's smile was sharp. "Get sick, have an accident, make him face the reality that mortality isn't gentle or distant, it's immediate and brutal. When he's staring at the possibility of losing you right now, he'll choose the transformation. He'll have to." "That's manipulative," Zara said slowly. "It's pragmatic." Seraphine stood. "You want forever with him. He wants forever with you. The only thing standing in your way is his fear, so give him something more immediate to fear." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you survive the transformation. He deserves happiness, and I think you might actually be able to give it to him." Zara thought about Seraphine's advice for days. She didn't want to manipulate Oberion, she loved him too much for that. But the vampire woman wasn't wrong. They were trapped in a stalemate, and time was on no one's side. The decision was taken out of her hands 3 weeks later. She was in the upper city, attending a gallery opening. Oberion had encouraged her to maintain some of her human connections and activities. She'd just stepped out onto the street to hail a car when someone grabbed her from behind. Human, male, smelling of alcohol and desperation. "Ah! Wallet!" he hissed, pressing something sharp against her ribs. "Now!" Zara had trained for vampire attacks. She'd learned to fight creatures with superhuman strength and speed. She wasn't prepared for a simple human mugging. She tried to execute one of the moves Oberion had taught her, but she was slow. Too slow. The man's knife slid between her ribs before she could stop him. The pain was immediate and enormous. Zara gasped, stumbling, her hands going to her side. She felt blood, so much blood, hot and wet against her palm. The mugger fled. Zara collapsed against the building wall, sliding down to sit on the pavement. Her phone. She needed her phone, needed to call Oberion. She didn't have to call. The bond carried her pain, her fear, directly to him. She felt his response like a shockwave, terror and rage and desperate determination. People were gathering around her. Someone was calling for an ambulance. Zara couldn't focus on them. All she could feel was her blood pulsing out with each heartbeat and Oberion's presence in her mind, screaming for her to hold on. He arrived before the ambulance, moving faster than human eyes could track. Suddenly he was there, kneeling beside her, his hands pressing against the wound. "No," he was saying over and over. "No, no, no, Zara, stay with me, stay with me." "Hurts," she managed. "I know, love, I know." His hands were covered in her blood. "The ambulance is coming. They'll fix this. You're going to be fine." But Zara could feel the truth through their bond. He was terrified. This was bad. "Turn me," she whispered. Oberion went very still. "What?" "Turn me. Now. Before I die." Zara grabbed his shirt with failing strength. "Please, Oberion. I don't want to leave you. I want forever. Give me forever. The transformation is dangerous. In your weakened state, I'm dying anyway." Zara could feel darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. "This way, at least there's a chance. Please, I love you. Give me a chance." Oberion's face was anguished, but she felt the moment he made his decision, felt his fear shift into grim determination. "Hold on," he commanded. Then, to the gathered crowd, "Get back, all of you, back now." He didn't wait for them to comply. He bit into his own wrist, tearing deep, and pressed the wound to Zara's mouth. "Drink," he ordered. "Drink, Zara. Don't stop until I tell you to." Vampire blood tasted like copper and winter and something else, something that made Zara's whole body sing. She drank desperately, feeling warmth spread through her even as her own blood continued to flow. "That's it," Oberion murmured. "Good. Keep drinking. Take everything you need." The ambulance sirens were getting closer. Oberion lifted Zara effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. And then he ran. The world became a blur of speed and motion. Zara closed her eyes, focusing only on drinking, on the blood that was somehow keeping her conscious, even as she should have been fading. They reached the Undercity. Oberion carried her straight to his chambers, laying her on his bed with infinite care. "Is it done?" Zara whispered. "Am I—" "Not yet." Oberion's face was drawn. "The transformation takes 3 days. You'll die first, your human body shutting down completely. Then, if you're strong enough, if your will is strong enough, you'll wake as vampire." His hand stroked her hair. "And if you're not strong enough—" "I am." Zara caught his hand, bringing it to her lips. "I'm strong enough, I promise." "I'm going to kill the man who did this to you," Oberion said conversationally. "I'm going to hunt him down and make him understand what it means to hurt what's mine." "Later," Zara said. "Stay with me now." So he did. Oberion climbed onto the bed beside her, gathering her into his arms. And as Zara's heartbeat began to slow, as her human body began the process of dying, she felt his love surrounding her, through their bond a beacon to guide her back. The pain came in waves. Zara's body was shutting down, her organs failing one by one. It should have been terrifying, but Oberion's presence in her mind kept her anchored. He talked to her constantly, telling her stories of his long life, reminding her of their time together, promising her all the things they'd do when she woke. "We'll go to Paris," he murmured as her breathing became labored. "I'll show you the catacombs where the vampire court holds masquerades. We'll dance until dawn threatens, and then I'll carry you home and make love to you until you can't remember your own name." Zara tried to smile, but wasn't sure her face was responding anymore. "We'll visit Tokyo during cherry blossom season," Oberion continued. "The vampire gardens there grow flowers that only bloom at night, and they're the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Second most beautiful. You're the first." Her heart stuttered, missing beats. "We'll have forever," Oberion said, and his voice cracked. "Forever, Zara. Just hold on. Fight for it. Fight for us." She wanted to tell him she was fighting, that she was holding on with everything she had, but her voice wouldn't work anymore. All she could do was feel his presence in her mind and push all her love toward him, hoping he understood. Her heart stopped. Oberion's anguish flooded the bond, sharp enough to hurt even in her dying state. But Zara didn't let go. She held onto him, held onto the thread of connection between them, and refused to fade. Time lost meaning. Zara floated in darkness, aware of her body being dead, aware of Oberion holding her corpse and refusing to let go. She heard voices, Seraphine, Victor, others, but they seemed distant and unimportant. What mattered was the tiny spark of something new inside her, something that was growing, feeding on Oberion's blood, remaking her from the inside out. It hurt. God, it hurt worse than dying had. It hurt worse. Every cell in her body was being rewritten, transformed from human to something other. Zara wanted to scream, but she had no breath. She wanted to flee, but she had nowhere to go. Oberion's voice cut through the pain. "Come back to me. Zara, come back. I'm here. I'm waiting. Just come back." She reached for that voice like a lifeline, reached for the bond between them, reached for the love that had made her choose this nightmare. And slowly, painfully, impossibly, she began to return. Awareness came back in stages. First, the feeling of fabric against her skin. Then, the sound of Oberion's breathing. Then, the scent of him, winter and old books and something uniquely him. Finally, she managed to open her eyes. The room was too bright. Every candle flame was like looking at the sun. Zara winced, closing her eyes again. "Zara?" Oberion's voice was raw with hope and fear. She tried again, forcing her eyes open and focusing past the overwhelming sensory input. Oberion's face swam into view, and she'd never seen him so clearly before. Every detail was sharp and perfect, from individual hairs to the flecks of color in his irises. "Hi," she croaked. Her voice sounded strange, richer, resonant. Oberion made a sound between a laugh and a sob. He gathered her against him, holding her so tightly it should have hurt, but somehow didn't. "You came back," he said into her hair. "You came back to me." "Told you I would." Zara's arms came up to hold him back, and she was startled by her own strength. "Did it work? Am I vampire?" "Yes." Oberion pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "You survived. You did it." Zara looked down at her hands. Her skin was paler, with that same luminous quality Oberion had. When she touched her hair, she found it had lightened to silver blonde. "Mirror," she said. Oberion helped her stand. Her legs were unsteady but growing stronger by the moment, and led her to a full-length mirror. The woman looking back at her was familiar but changed. Her bone structure was the same, but refined somehow. Her eyes were brighter, the color intensified. Her skin glowed with inner light, and when she smiled experimentally, she saw the hint of fangs. "I'm beautiful," she said, surprised. "You always were." Oberion stood behind her, his arms around her waist. In the mirror, they looked perfectly matched, two pale, ethereal creatures. "Now you're just immortally so." Zara turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Forever." "Forever," Oberion confirmed. His eyes were wet. "You gave me forever, Zara. You fought death and won. You chose me over mortality. You—" His voice broke. "I love you," Zara said simply. "Of course I chose you." They kissed, and it was different now. Zara was stronger, fast enough to match him. When Oberion backed her toward the bed, she went willingly, and their lovemaking was fierce and equal, two immortal predators learning each other anew. Afterwards, Zara lay beside him, marveling at how different everything felt. She could hear conversations happening rooms away, could smell the blood flowing through veins in distant parts of the palace, could feel the stone of the earth surrounding them, the weight and age of it. "It's overwhelming," she said. "It will be for a while." Oberion's fingers trailed along her arm. "But you'll adapt. We'll make sure of it." "We? The court? Myself? Everyone who loves you." Oberion smiled. "And yes, you're loved. Even Seraphine came to check on you every day while you transformed. She threatened to stake me if you didn't survive." Zara laughed, and the sound was musical. "Really? Really?" Oberion's expression turned serious. "You've changed things here, Zara. Not just for me, but for all of us. A human who became vampire for love, it's romantic, inspiring. Some of the younger vampires are already talking about seeking their own human connections. Is that good?" "I think so." Oberion kissed her forehead. "Our kind has been stagnant too long. We need new blood, new perspectives, new ways of seeing the world. You've given us that. Given me that." The following weeks were a blur of learning and adaptation. Zara had to learn to feed a process that was both more and less disturbing than she had expected. Oberion taught her to take only what she needed from willing donors, to never kill, to treat feeding as sacred rather than shameful. She had to learn to move with her new strength and speed without breaking things. She had to adjust to senses so acute that the world was sometimes painful in its intensity. She had to learn the full extent of vampire powers, the ability to command shadows, to move with supernatural silence, to sense life and death in ways humans never could. But she also got to experience the joy of her transformation, running faster than cars, reading ancient texts in languages she'd never studied but could now understand instinctively, sparring with Oberion and actually landing hits, dancing at vampire balls with grace she'd never possessed as a human. And she got to watch Oberion change too. The bone-deep loneliness that had haunted him began to fade. He smiled more, laughed more, seemed lighter, younger, despite his centuries. "You've given me a second life," he told her one night as they stood in his conservatory, watching the sunset through protected glass. "I thought I was done. Thought I'd exist but never truly live again. Then you walked into that restaurant, exhausted and beautiful, and everything changed." "Best dinner I ever bought," Zara said with a smile. "Best dinner I ever bought out." Oberion pulled her close, though I have to admit I've been planning something. "Oh? A wedding?" Oberion turned her to face him. "Human tradition, I know. But I'd like to honor it. I want to marry you, Zara, properly. with vows and witnesses and a promise made before both our worlds. Zara felt tears blood-tinged now. She'd have to get used to that well up. Yes, of course. The wedding took place 6 months after Zara's transformation. They held it in the conservatory at sunset, with vampires and carefully selected humans in attendance. Zara wore a gown of silver and white that made her look like moonlight personified. Oberion wore black and looked like every romance novel hero come to life. They exchanged traditional vows, but Oberion added his own words at the end. I, Oberion Hargrove, have lived 800 years, he said, holding Zara's hands. I've seen wonders and horrors, experienced every emotion, reached every height and depth the world has to offer. But nothing compares to the joy of standing here with you. You are my miracle, Zara, my impossible gift, my reason for existing through all those empty years. I love you with everything I am, everything I've been, and everything I will be. Forever isn't long enough, but I'll take every moment of it and be grateful. Zara was crying openly now. I, Zara Reynolds, have lived 26 years, and I died at 26 and was reborn as something new, something other. She squeezed his hands. But through it all, through fear and transformation and impossible choices, you've been there. You've been my anchor, my guide, my love. You bought out a restaurant so I could have one quiet meal, and you gave me forever so we'd never have to be apart. I love you, Oberion, in this life and whatever comes after. They were pronounced married by an ancient vampire priest who blessed them in languages that predated modern civilization. And when they kissed, sealing their vows, Zara felt the bond between them deepen even further, becoming something unbreakable and eternal. The celebration lasted 3 days. Vampire parties weren't constrained by human limitations. There was music and dancing, blood wine and elaborate foods for those who could still enjoy them, and hundreds of vampires coming to pay their respects to the king and his new queen. Seraphine approached Zara on the final night, offering a formal bow. Your Majesty, she said, and there was no sarcasm in it. You've done well, better than I expected. Thank you, Zara said. And thank you for your advice about convincing Oberion. I'm glad you survived. Seraphine's smile was small but genuine. He's happy. I haven't seen him this happy in centuries. That's worth more than any jealousy I might have harbored. Will you stay? Zara asked. In the court? I'd like to have you as an ally if you're willing. Seraphine studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yes, I'll stay. Someone needs to keep you from making rookie mistakes after all. They weren't quite friends, but they'd found a kind of respect. That was enough. As the party wound down, Oberion pulled Zara away, leading her back to their private chambers. They had expanded the rooms now, making space for both of them, combining their lives in every physical way. Happy? Oberion asked as they settled by the fire. Deliriously. Zara curled against him. Though I do have a question. Anything. That restaurant, Marcellini's. Do you still have exclusive access? Oberion laughed. Actually, yes, I bought it outright after that first night. Why? Because I'd like to go back. Zara looked up at him. On our anniversary every year, I want to sit in that restaurant and remember the night everything changed, the night I walked in exhausted and desperate for peace and found you instead. I love that idea, Oberion kissed her softly. Though I should warn you I'm much harder to impress now that I don't have to brood alone in empty restaurants. I'll manage, Zara kissed him back. I have forever to figure it out after all. And she did. They both did. Forever stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. There would be challenges. Certainly ruling an immortal society was never simple. There would be threats in politics and the occasional assassination attempt. But they would face it together, king and queen, husband and wife. Two souls who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to bind themselves for eternity. Years later, Zara would look back on that first night and marvel at how a simple desire for a quiet meal had led to the greatest love she could have imagined. How exhaustion and loneliness had brought her to the exact right place at the exact right time to meet the one person who would change everything. Oberion would tell her it was fate, destiny. The universe correcting itself after 800 years of keeping them apart. Zara thought it might have been simpler than that. Sometimes two lonely people just needed to be in the same space at the same time, both seeking the same thing: peace, connection, and the hope that they weren't alone after all. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, they found more than just a quiet meal. They found forever. The Vampire King had bought out an entire restaurant to give himself one evening of peace. Instead, he'd found his queen, his mate, his eternal companion. And Zara had walked in seeking a quiet dinner alone and found a love that would last until the stars themselves burned out. It was, they both agreed, the best dinner reservation either of them had ever made.